Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the Luton bass band UK Decay, because I recently spoke to two of their members, vocalist guitarist Steve Abbott, and also their other guitarist Steve Spon. So this is the interview. So it's going to be a three-way interview, which is always so much fun. So basically Abbo is the one who talks first and Spon talks second. So you're just gonna have to work out who's who actually. Quality-wise, it's pretty damn good considering. So it's via Zoom, but you get the gist. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject. It was the early formative years. Abbo, it's over to you.
No, just saying, interesting enough, we didn't have a lot, the four in the band, we had a few things that we each liked, but we all had quite different tastes in music. And of course, in those days, there was no such thing as having your own sort of wired for sound stereo system. You had to share the van stereo, the cassette player. So it used to cause quite a bit of controversy as to who was in charge. Spon used to do most of the driving, so he was probably the commander of that cassette recorder. But it was, I think reggae was the one thing that probably bonded us all together. But I'm a huge Bowie fan.
Yes.
Always have been. And, whereas Eddie was more into anything with a heavy bass. He could listen to music almost purely listening to the bass lines rather than anything else. And Steve Harle, again, he was very into, actually probably similar music to Spon, I think, in many ways. Spon, you talk about your taste. I remember Spon was a big fan of, was it MX-80?
Oh, yes. MX-80, Padre Ubu, and the 13th floor elevator. But yeah, Bowie as well, of course. I was really regretful that I missed his gig at Dunstable in 1972. I'd seen Hawkwind do the Space Ritual in Dunstable. And for some reason, 2 weeks later, I missed David Bowie, who played there. But I didn't know him at the time. But a year later, it was a different matter.
Yes, it would have been terrible. So your childhood, did you have sort of musical parents or brothers or sisters that gave you a kind of a direction that made you think, God, yes, I love the sound of this? A bit like, like I said, hearing sort of those early glam period, records or things like, the Beatles or something like that.
I certainly didn't. No, we didn't redo music at school or anything. My dad sort of like pull ropes and sort of lengthen sound of music, and my mum was into Tchaikovsky and stuff, but we didn't even have a record player really. But I had three elder sisters who did have record players. So I was very much influenced by what they liked. My younger sister, Jill, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore, she used to buy me records that she wanted for my birthday present.
Classic.
So it'd be, a lot of, let's say, I've still got those, a lot of early reggae singles. We used to have a barber's in Dunstable Road, just off Dunstable Road in Luton, and they used to cut hair, but also it was a record import shop for stuff coming from Jamaica. People would come back with their suitcases full of records, and we'd stand outside there all day listening to music, blasting out this barber's shop. And, my sister would be flirting with the boys because she was about 6-7 years older than me, and I'll just be there taking it in.
Yes.
So it was, I think, and I was also a very big Motown fan, huge Motown fan, still am. I suppose that soul music, reggae, Motown thing, Luton was very multicultural, and it is, obviously still is. And it was a blessing growing up in that environment where there were so many different types of music around you. And, I think even then you sort of chose your tribe. You chose the group of people, your mates you hung out with, and you liked the same music,
Yes, absolutely.
But I heard Space Oddity was a life changer when I heard that album. That I think, the Bowie tracks I really liked from the early 70s were things like Signet Committee, I'm Watching Somewhat Slightly Dazed, Bewley Brothers, those tracks with just almost like a ramble, where he's rambling stream of consciousness ideas. And when I first started to play guitar, when I was about 16, I bought a guitar at 16, couldn't really play it. I tried to play those songs. I realized they were impossible for a beginner.
Yes.
And you realise actually Bowie was, not just a great wordsmith, but he was actually a really good guitarist, very inventive. There's all sorts of fingerings that you could see it on a piece of tablature paper, but you couldn't work out how to get you need 8 fingers to sort of get the chord. He was absolutely brilliant.
Yes. And what about things like Memories of a Free Festival or Song for Hermione? Did those sort of songs resonate at all with you?
Yeah, Free Festival less so, because I found that a little bit boring. But Song for Hermione is, I've never heard that name. And when it appeared in Harry Potter book, I couldn't believe it, because I thought it'd been made up, because we didn't know he'd had a girlfriend, and there's a famous picture of them two together. But I think, like the poetry, the hand that wrote this letter sweeps a pillow clean, they were magical words. I didn't really properly understand them at, sort of 10 or 12 years old, but I knew they were magical. And, it's one of those things that really, probably along with reading Dylan Thomas at school under Milkwood, really introduced me to the world of poetry and lyrics. And I think I'd probably credit a song like that, 4 or 5 songs like that sort of put the idea that you can, use poetry to talk about real life things, because obviously she existed, and it's a beautiful, poignant love song.
Yes,
even
absolutely. Yes, absolutely, and it has even more poignancy. Did you, when you got to 16, did you leave school at that stage, or did you go on for A levels?
I went for A levels. I went to Luton Sixth Form College. There wasn't really any jobs around, so it was a way of extending that sort of existence. I can't say I really studied. I got a D and an E. So, but as Spon will tell you, the school I went to a very rough school called Rotherham High School. It's been knocked down now, Rotherham in Luton. And it wasn't about studying. It was really just getting through the 5 years of whatever, bullying or, sports and stuff. But those lessons that taught me, probably more better life lessons I would have ever learned from a teacher, in an academic situation. And it gives you a noose. And I think, one of the things as a band that we had, because we hadn't come from a privileged world or even art school, was that we were very in touch with the real world. So, the songs hopefully had something that reflected those times, rather than were out the sort of the books of Asimov or J.G. Ballard or even, Lord of the Rings.
Yes, well, yeah, we don't want. Yes, the world of. Did things like prog rock enter Fulham at all? Luton, sorry. Yes,
very much so.
Did the work of Yes and Genesis and Rick Wakeman and Barclay James Harvest, did that sort of slip into your consciousness?
Yeah, but again, I had 3 older sisters, and we'll come to Spon in a minute because I'm hogging the mic. But my eldest sister was a big prog rock fan, and I saw most of those bands. I never saw Yes. But Barclay James Harvest album, once again, is still one of my favourite albums of all time. And there's a beautiful love song on it called Galadriel. Again, when I heard that name in Lord of the Rings, the film, I was watching that. It's like, one of those names. I suppose they were from a different class to where we came from. But once again, I think it's brilliant. Norman Smith's string arrangements, incredible. And what I like about Barclay James Harvest, because when the punk thing came along, you had to hate Barclay James Harvest. And I love the idea of being contrarian and saying, no, actually, I think they're really good. I probably didn't say it in interviews. I said it to people asking. And, I'm still a Pink Floyd fan. Well, not still a Pink Floyd fan. They finished for me, Wish You Were Here was the last album. But, all this craziness about I only like Syd Barrett in Pink Floyd type of thing, it's rubbish. The first album was great, but so is Meddle, so is Dark Side of the Moon. I think it's a masterpiece. In fact, I listened to, there's a Live in Oakland bootleg of Pink Floyd that's so aggressive, so full of sort of angst about the world that, I think I don't like them as personalities, what I read about them. But I think, again, the clash of personalities, even though they were sort of pretty well-to-do toffs, created something quite special musically, and met the message of was obviously Roger Waters, Yes. So prog rock came, but it didn't really touch our lives. We listened to it because it was around, but I don't think it got to the heart like Catch a Fire or Burning, the Bob Marley albums did, or Natty Dread. I mean, they were incredible, or the Norman Whitfield stuff, the Temptations masterpiece, or the Four Tops. I think Levi Stubbs is one of the greatest singers of all time, but of course he didn't write the words, so he's not considered, someone that you take seriously. But you take Roger Daltrey seriously, whereas Pete Townsend wrote every word he uttered,
Yes.
Sometimes it's better not to know what happened behind the music. It's better just to listen to it for face value and not know the machinations, what created it,
Well, I suppose one of my first loves, apart from that glam period, was people like the Carpenters and Karen Carpenter's voice and the lyrics, and realizing she didn't probably write the songs, but the sentiment behind them were truly heartbreaking when you listen to them as a 10-year-old. And even now, you just think, my God, that's just poetry, really, isn't it? So.
Yeah, they never touched me, but I do like I'm on the top of the world. Look, it was when I was living in America. It was one of those tracks that I heard probably shopping in Kmart or something, and it came on. I thought, you know what, that's a really good song, and it feels good. It's like you wouldn't imagine them, because like you say, they were so maudlin and so depressing, their lyrics, or lovely if you look at it from a different way. But that song had quite a bit of spunk in it. It was quite a bit of get up and go.
And what was your love of football by this stage in the 70s?
It was Luton Town. Yeah, my dad was a West Ham fan, and I grew up in Luton on the Farleigh estate, and he took me to see Luton when I was 4. So it's 58 years on. We're playing West Ham tomorrow, and I've been supporting them for 58 years, and I love Luton Town. I mean, I was just talking to a school friend of mine. They're sort of the most important thing in our lives, I think, and they have been forever. Family. I like to say family accepted, close family accepted, but football is the most important thing. Luton Town Football Club. Not football and FIFA and World Cups and England and all that rubbish, but just when you have something that is so within you. I hate flags, I hate nationalism, but I love Luton.
There you go. What was I was just talking to Spon before you came on about the plastic pitch years. When was that, by the way?
That was after the Millwall riot, so that would have been in the 80s.
Right. The very big bouncy ball.
Yeah. Well, we liked it because we were very good on it. So we didn't complain, and we've always been the I suppose the runt in the pack, as we are now in the Premiership, the one that everyone hates because they don't realise they should love them because of our ground and history, and it's owned by fans and stuff, But there's a resentment about Luton as a town, let alone a football club, isn't there, Spon?
Yes, there absolutely is. I'm forever defending Luton against the Tate brothers. One of the Tate brothers did a YouTube video recently about Luton and saying failed state and walking through the arm down and pointing out what rubbish it all is. Well, there are problems in Luton, but there are problems in lots of towns as well. So, to actually diss Luton without really good explanation. I mean, the whole country, in a sense, could be argued is a failed state at the moment. We could really do with, I don't know, getting out over this horrible period of time of what would you call it? Is culture wars, and, polarization. I've never known it so divisive. So with Luton, it is changing. People often say Luton is a port. Well, it's where people come into the country for the first time and they stop off and move elsewhere. But my family moved down from Merseyside originally, but lots of families moved in from all different parts of the world, and it truly is a multicultural town. And the advantages of all these different races of people, it's very similar to London, really, with lots of different cultures of people mingling and stuff. I did pop into Luton. I put a toe back into Luton a couple of weeks ago, which is the first time for 3 years.
I mean, God, your heart must have been aching. But I think there's something, this is, we toured America. I mean, we were still quite young, very young when we toured the West Coast. And, it was a bit like, I suppose we haven't heard the Clash song, I'm Aboard the USA. We were ready to be incredibly cynical, but we weren't really that tight. We were very much, to use the Bowie analogy, we were sort of the fly in the milk. So it was all alien to us, but we were trying to swim. And, it wasn't so long after the Vietnam War. It was 5-6 years after the Vietnam War had finished. So there was a lot of people with missing limbs on the streets and a lot of poverty around, and it's interesting we did quite a few interviews, and I remember what kept coming up was the class system in Britain. I didn't they realise we were from the lower classes. They just presumed that everyone was from the upper class, and when they talk about it. And I've never had a problem with the class thing. I've got friends who went to Eton. I actually represent people that went to Eton. It's a great education if you get the chance, but of course most people don't get the chance. And, what I came to realise was it's sort of, Americans think of poverty as a sort of personal failing rather than a social condition. And they conversely sort of conflate wealth with intelligence and capability. But then when I came back to Britain, it became totally apparent, being in the early 20s, that Britain does as well. We just have the same metric, albeit one is you're born into it here, so you have an advantage. In America, it's earned or mostly handed down to you from your parents. And this horrible idea that the metric of success is what your wealth is one of the whole things that's driven this crazy commercialism in Britain, where, things are valued because what they're seen to be worth rather than what their real emotional worth is, and it's driving a lot of the, I think, isolation of good intent in this country, because it is all about the money, and it still is. So I think we have more in common with America. America has more in common with us, and probably why we make good bed partners, aside from being in the Anglosphere. Whereas you go to New Zealand, Australia, actually you get laughed at if you wear anything that's a bit sort of ostentatious or show-offy. In fact, there was a moment in Luton when we had quite a few bag snatches. When I was working with Luton Culture, which is the sort of the art scene in Luton, the funded art scene. And it was interesting because we met one of the leaders of what was seen as the national group that was doing this bag snatching over this crazy week of bags. And he said, look, in my country, you don't wear your wealth like as a boast, as a sort of a status. You actually hide it in your house. So you imagine you get, as Bond says, you come into the country like this Star Trek like teleport brings you to Luton Airport. You haven't got any family with you. You're here just to earn money. You're told this is the land of milk and honey. There aren't the jobs in Luton. So you've sort of landed, crime being an easy route, and the shock of people wearing a little handbag, that's got all their credit cards, their money, their keys to the car. It's just beyond them. They just couldn't understand that. Why would you have it all on you and carry it everywhere with you, And it was an interesting cultural exchange because, I think we learn quite quickly in Luton when you're younger, when you're surrounded by people, different cultures, that different cultures have different rules and different normals. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is those rules and normals become divisive in the wrong hands rather than being something is of interest. God, isn't it interesting that, a certain type of the fish head is exotic in this country when we actually bin our fish head, or, I remember going to see Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, the Qawwali singer. He played in Luton at the Rec Centre when I was about 15, 16, with mate Fahim. We went to see him. And God, I felt so alien in that room, but absolutely loved the ecstasy of the show. It's incredible. Went on for 3 hours. And I learned a lot from it. I mean, I was still just about to come into UK Decay. The whole evening, it sort of crescendo up and up and up, and it can't go any higher, up and up and up. And of course, part of that was the cultural experience of seeing something so different to what I was used to, that I found it really exciting. Whereas, of course, with the problems we have are more built on the fact that people say it's threatening. They don't see the excitement of it. Anyway.
Yes, no, absolutely. No,
that was a long answer to a short question, as they say.
I was very excited with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and Muster, but yes.
Yeah, Muster. And then, of course, when I worked with Jeff Buckley, we traveled a lot around in the car, just myself and him and his guitar when we were touring UK. And he loved Nusrat, and he learnt it by rote, Jeff. He could sing Musty Musty, beginning to end. He didn't know what the hell it meant. Pre-internet, of course,
Yes.
But you realise actually the text was music in itself. The way you would hum a tune, he'd learn every intonation of like the voice and obviously the text. And to me, Nusrat is exactly you. It's musty, But yeah.
Yes, amazing. So look, as we trundle through the 70s, getting towards 79, what's your musical moment actually that you first get into a band? What's the first band that you form and start to develop as a musician?
Well, Spon was ahead of me.
Yeah, I kind of embarked on a catering career to start with. So I learned how to be a chef and
Make a bloody good curry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's actually French cuisine. I really wish we'd have learned more about Asian culinary cooking and stuff. It would have suited me better, actually. But after 2 or 3 years of it, I got I found out it wasn't really my deal. It was the amount of hours that you might have to work at catering. You'd work in the mornings, finish about 3 o'clock, and then go back to 6 o'clock and work in the evenings until midnight. And usually on Friday and Saturday night at the weekends and stuff. And of course, that didn't really matter. It wasn't a good mix and match for 17, 18-year-olds. So eventually I got to a point where I started going to concerts at the California Ballroom and at the Queensway in Dunstable, which were two local events to ours. California Ballroom was legendary in the fact that if you took away all the bands that actually played there during the 60s and 70s, there'd be no music scene left. Probably the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, but all the Tamla Motown bands and soul bands, they all played there. And the more progressive rock bands played at the Queensway Hall, the Curved Airs and the Grorbs and the David Bowie played there, Hawkwind would play there regularly. I can't, there's a whole list of bands that played there. But that coming into the later 70s, bands like the Stranglers and Sex Pistols played the Queensway Hall in Dunstable. I was there when the Sex Pistols played with the Jam supporting, and there was 80 people in the audience and a venue that held 1,800 people. But it was a seed of something that was different. I'd been to see Pink Floyd, which I really loved, at the mega concert of Nebworth in 1975, and it was so utterly huge. And the benches got torn down and people broke in, and there was a big stink going on because at the back of the auditorium the toilets had overflowed and started seeping down the hill, and gradually waves of people were moving out of the way of the sludge. But they played, and they played the whole album, and then they played "Wish You Were Here." Was that the second, the one following it up?
After Dark Side, that was,
yeah. So they played those two albums, and it was like, my God, where can anything go above this? Because they had massive fireworks, they had quadraphonic sounds and lights. It was just so over the top. There was something like 250,000 people had turned up there, and there was only supposed to be 100,000. But it was also a watershed moment, because it's like, it can't carry on like this. All the bands were trying to outdo themselves with big shows, with lights, and the next lot that came on was Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and they were trying to outdo each other. So something had to give, and then of course it went right back down to the street with punk rock, and that punk rock showed that it was possible for ordinary people to get back involved in music again. So we could seize our moment and join a punk rock band, which is what I did. Probably in 1977, I joined a band called Chaos. I flirted with a band called Toad the Wet Sprocket for a little while, and they were blues. But then Chaos was more like, we played with Sham 69, and that was a dreadful gig in Bury St Edmunds. But something had to give. We started building a rehearsal room in the basement at the end of 1978 in Wellington Street. And so we had an operations centre together so bands could rehearse. So this was about that time at the end of 78, early '79 that we met you guys, and other bands rehearsed in the basement, basically.
So was it two bands that came together to form UK Decay?
Well, essentially, there was the Resiztors and there was Snow White, and I was in a band called Snow White with Gaynor and Steve Voice and people. Abbo was with. You joined the Resiztors with Martin and Steve Harle, and early 1979, the lineups changed and coalesced into UK Decay and New Mania, and we teamed up together and pooled our resources, and between us, we managed to be able to afford to put a 1,000-run copy of what we called a split single. And, you know, that's where we took it off from there. We had people on mopeds going around helping us deliver the records to the local music shops in the local towns, and Abbo would nip off to London and take boxes of records down to Rough Trade and various markets, street markets and things. And really, it was just getting the record out to people. We sent the record off to the New Music Express, and to find out a week or two later, Charles Shaw Murray and Danny Baker had slated it as being the search for the world's worst punk band has now ended. That meant that from that point on, the Rough Trade were on the phone to us saying, "Can we have more copies of your record? It's sold out." But then we're as a small label, we couldn't just ask for another 1,000 copies of the record. We had to pay for them as well. But all our money was out on that first. So we had hiccups like that, which is a bit of a shame. But we eventually got it out again, and the notoriety and the fact that we were going out, getting gigs from outside of town and that, rather than just settling for being a local band,
Yes,
we're able to spread our wings, basically.
Because it was.
Is that about a right approximation?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think we sort of stumbled into it. There was never a plan. It's sort of, I suppose we all strive in life to sort of improve the hand you're dealt with at birth. And there's people that plan things and sort of aspire to things. But I don't think any of us did, not that I ever felt that the sort of coincidence of birth should be translated into some kind of moral responsibility to, follow on with what your parents did, or, do a job that earn the most money and contribute to society. We didn't really think about that. I think, my personal aspiration was to try and grow into an extremely well-educated, uneducated teenager, by reading a lot. But but I say there was no sort of line of ambition. We just sort of fell into it. And I think, punk was giving people more options as to what you wanted to be for the first time. So, that signal came through to us hard and fast, but not really as a way to get rich, but as a way to perhaps tell your story, or find a commonality with other people's situation, or even to fight against the things you didn't like racism and sexism and things that, we were lucky that we lived in a sort of a universe where they just didn't make sense because your friends were from all different places. So the blueprint of the sort of the right-wing thoughts just didn't work. So, so the point I'm trying to make is we literally, we knew Spon. I ended up in a band because I bought a guitar off someone, and he was the guitarist of the band, so he didn't have a guitar. So I had a guitar. So I had his guitar for 15 quid, a lovely Woolworths guitar, which I've got next door, actually. I've just found it. And, then the singer didn't turn up one gig, so I started singing. It very soon became clear after 4 or 5 gigs, whilst we were filling local venues of 200 or 300 people, that I was a crap guitarist. Spon was in New Mania, a band that we were playing with. So Spon sort of stepped over to our world, our band. And, then we just started putting singles out. And I think that just happened in such a natural process that it probably was our undoing at one point, because the business side of things was so poorly done. But the upside is it was quite innocent. There was no need to, I don't know. There was sort of a punk thing of that era. It was sort of just after the Clash and the Damned and the Jam and Stranglers, and you sort of had the Stranglers on one side that were unauthentic, and you had the Clash who were totally authentic, and then you had the Jam that sort of floated in the middle. A lot of it was about authenticity, but I think being authentic means you already know. You can't be taught authenticity. It's there. It's not. And we were authentic, I think, because we came from a place where a lot of the reasons that people wanted to make music or did try and be in band stuff, it wasn't really ever on a horizon as an option. That wasn't why you did it. And it sort of entirely missed the point. People like the people that reviewed the early singles of us and many other acts, because they were, well, you weren't there in 1976, so why would we need to listen to you? Well, in 1976, we were 14 and 15 years old. So we didn't have a voice,
Yes.
Anyway, so we stumbled into it, really, I think.
Yeah.
We stumbled into being a full-time band.
So in that period, 79, Margaret Thatcher gets in, so we have Thatcherism for the next, 80s, 10 years. And then there's the Falkland War, then there's the miners' strike, there's Greenham Common, there's a huge amount of unemployment. So how do you navigate that period? Because you've had the punk, then there's that post-punk world of quite scratchy and interesting bands, and then there's the sort of the Blitz kids and new romantic stuff's happening. There's going to be a few more years before bands like the Smiths appear in 83 with that kind of indie sound. So you're kind of at the cusp of this kind of new decade and sort of, a lot of punk bands had already got really fed up with punk when they started originally, because people started to all look like Sid Vicious. They thought, well, that's not what I've got into punk for. So what was it like trying to be in a band in the early 80s?
It was confusing, I think, because there wasn't really a uniform, like there was in 76, 77. And that uniform was probably the people standing there on the Bill Grundy show, from Johnny Rotten through to Susie Sue. By the early 80s, you also had bands like The Fall. Certainly didn't have a uniform. I mean, I don't know what, there was no, like I say, this is the whole thing about authenticity. Nothing, some people didn't premeditate things. There was no, this is what we wanted to look like because it's going to make us successful. Obviously, the punk influence was heavy with the spiky hair and sort of the clothes you wore and the ex-army fatigues. Although, to be honest, the ex-army fatigues were very cheap. I mean, they were literally sort of 50p or a quid for a pair of trousers, And, to quote Joe Strummer, turning rebellion into money, I felt a lot less of that was going on in the early 80s. And it did feel like a new epoch, because we were a lot younger than those bands that come before us. They tended to be sort of 20, 25, 30, we were doing this at like 16, 17 and 18. And there's a big difference in those few years. You do wear your heroes on your sleeve when you're younger, but I don't think we really did. And I could talk about quite a few. We were more interested, I think, in trying to tell the story of the world as we would like it, without any great expectations it would ever change. But Spon will tell you, we found more and more people that come into our gigs that shared our views. And I don't think they were coming because they shared our views originally. I think it was hopefully because of the sort of community that we built around us and other bands that did stand out, because they would stand up against racism or bigotry or sexism or a lot of the other evils of the era that were totally accepted. And what people forget about Thatcher and the Falklands was when she went to the Falklands War, nearly the whole country was supporting her. It was incredible. Yes. I mean, you look at it now with all the stories about, Commonwealth and slave trade and, cultural appropriations and stuff. And there's no way Britain should own the Falkland Islands. We knew that. And we were very young, but it was really fighting against the crowd and, the lazy racism in everyday conversation, or even the TV programs. I know now they're being picked apart. The big problem for me was the racist family in Love Thy Neighbour were called the Abbott family. So I'm like, I sat watching my dad and he's a simple working class guy. He knew it was wrong. My mum knew it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But if you didn't join in the laugh, you were sort of on the other side of the fence to the majority. So it really was there was a huge gulf, and we had a lot of problems at our concerts with people, right-wing people turning up and just wanting to beat us up, basically. And again, we didn't premeditate that. We didn't go out there to go around the country having fights. We wanted to play music, but our views were, so contrary to to what the mainstream was. You found out you were in an absolute minority. And like I was saying, what was great about the punk rock thing was that immediacy of expression. We didn't have to go to art college to create a piece of art. We didn't have to go to a music conservatoire to compose music. We just did it. And so our views sort of was, processed in a very short time. It wasn't like the gestation period and then the big construction and then sort of releasing it to the world, like we'd written a novel or something. You write a song and you're playing it that night. And that was the beauty of it. We didn't realize at the time, but that was the simplicity. And, I remember the Clash seemed to put out a single every month. There was one period where they're pumping them out. And it was White Man House with Pally, Clash at Your Rockers, Remote Control, English Civil War, they were substantial statements and they were just pumped out. Boom, 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 boom.
But and then kind of early on, in your the life of the band, you get a John Peel session. I mean, the gatekeepers are huge at this point, aren't they? Every town and village, every town and city has an indie punk night. There's the 3 weekly music papers and Record Mirror, and then the John Peel show, and possibly Kid Jensen, Janice Long. I mean, that must have been an absolutely amazing moment to get the call to say, do you want to do a session?
Yeah. Was it John Walters rang you, Spon? Spon was the only one who had a phone, because my family, we didn't have a phone. So I think Spon got the call from John Walters saying, John Peel wants you to come in for a session.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I dare say we sent the record off, one of our records off to him and that. And I think, please, John Peel, could we have a session, please?
Yeah. I think it was one of the millions, Yeah.
But with our association with Graham Bentley from Northampton, he put us in at the Nag's Head in Williston quite early. And that was one of the key secret venues that John Peel would play. It was his mate, Big Bob at Nag's Head. And he would, was it once a month or something like that? He would go there for a few pints, he'd spin a few records and watch the band that's playing. And they would try and get a band in that he might be interested in doing a session with. And so after we did the gigs in Northampton and in Luton at the one you put on Abbo at the Tech College, do you remember that one? With the
Yeah.
Word went down. Graham Bentley said to us, we'll see if we can get you a gig up at the Nag's Head. And it came to pass. That was in Wollaston. It's still there, but it's changed its name now. And we had this gig with John Peel playing, and we turned up and that. And of course, John Peel was there, and we had lots of words with him. He said, I'm here to see you, but I can't guarantee anything. I have to have a word with my producer. Then we said to him afterwards, well, what did you think? He goes, I really enjoyed it, but it's not up to me, it's up to John Walters. And then sure enough, we left phone numbers, and then a week or two later I got a phone call from John Walters and said, right, would you be interested in doing a John Peel? Of course. So within a few weeks we were at Maida Vale in London doing the session, and it was marvellous at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, the shocking thing for us was we had a free lunch out of it. It was sausage, egg, chips, and beans, as much as you could eat. It was like, and when you're on the road, that was a real pleasure. But John, we did 2 sessions with him, and he was very supportive. When we released Werewolf, which was our final single, he played it every night, and he started the show with it. It was like 11 minutes long, and it in those days we'd listen to John Peel. It was our big sort of font of discovering new music. And I can't remember where. I should remember. It's one of those things you remember where you were. But anyway, it was on. I turned the John Peel show on. It started with heavy breathing, and it just came on. It was like, oh my God, he's playing it. And he played the whole 10 minutes, and then he played it again the next night. It was like, he was such a great supporter of not just us, but a lot of people like us that were so disenfranchised from the NME covers or melody maker. We rarely had a word written about us that wasn't an absolute slagging off, because we probably just misunderstood, or we didn't fit a fashionable sort of trend of the moment.
Yes.
Then everything changed. And suddenly, we had journalists falling over to sort of write about you, and venues were filling up and things, and we had a lot of bands coming through that we'd met around on our travels that played with us, and the community grew so rapidly. I'm talking about probably France, Germany as well, and Holland, Belgium. It all changed overnight. Like someone put a switch and the light went on. It's like, oh, actually what they're doing is all right. Until then, we'd been a joke to the majority of journalists and most game changers, apart. And the reason I mention that, because John Peel was the exception, and Steve Keaton and 2 or 3 other journalists, Johnny Waller. They were different. They were different people. They didn't look at it as where do we fit into the trend? Yes. And to answer your question, which we're really failing to do tonight, I must say, 10 minutes into the answer, that new romantic thing was going on when we were going. Spandau Ballet and all that were kicking off, Visage. And, I met a lot of them because I was living in Brixton, hanging out in clubs after gigs, Rusty Egan and all that, Steve Strange. I got to know them people, and they, they were very friendly and very supportive, I must say, even though they lived in a totally different world. And, I was wearing army fatigues and they were wearing, their grandma's lace dress, and tons of makeup. It was tribal, more tribal than it is nowadays, I think. But, the tribe sort of coexisted. I don't think it's ever really competitive. And of course, a lot of the people in the new romantic world had come from the punk sort of background, music background. So, the Bowie thing, the Bowie thing hung over punk, and he hung over new romantics even more, of course, and even, of course, he hung over the electronic scene that came after us all, the whole Berlin techno through to everything else because of the B-sides of Hero and Low. I think we were all informed by Bowie, but I don't think he could be an influence because he was so far beyond us musically and lyrically and everything else.
Yes.
And of course, he did stylize things. He did have a template, albeit he smashed it 2 years later and formed another template. But anyway.
Yes, that's true. So Fresh Records, why did you sign for Fresh?
Well, they had a market stall. Alex Howard, a market stall in Soho Market. And I was down there in late 76. But there was a really good reggae shop. There was a Joe Gibbs 12 inches we were after that. I went down with a couple of mates from Luton. And there was a record stall playing sort of records. And I can't remember what records they were because I didn't know the music. But the Jam set up and played a gig there. So the 3 of them were playing in this market. It was called Soho Market. It was sort of, well, obviously it was in Soho. It was somewhere at the bottom of Wardour Street somewhere, between Wardour Street and Charing Cross. I wonder where it was, because there must be a new building there or something. But Soho Market was a buzzy sort of market with selling alternative clothes and stuff, probably from the hippie era. And we just caught 2 songs of the Jam, and I was absolutely blown away by it. Anyway, I got chatting to the guy there, and then move on 2.5 years, and somehow they came back into our life again. How did it happen, Spon? I can't remember. They spotted us, I think, because we were getting played. Oh, I'll tell you why. Because we were selling. They were a distribution company. So from his market stall, being on the cutting edge of punk, he was there when everyone was releasing their red vinyl and 7 inches and 1,000 of this, 1,000 of that. Acts like the Drones and someone in the Nosebleeds, can't remember who it was. Slaughtering the Dogs, Buzzcocks. So they then started to buy these records and distribute them. So we took our first single to them because they're one of the distributors in London, and they sold quite a few of them. And then we took the Black Cat single, and the Black Cat single we were selling 400 or 500 a week. So the obvious thing for them was to say, you know what, we'd like to put a single out by you. So they asked us to go and record a single. They hadn't heard the music. And we recorded For My Country and Unwind. That was the third single. That was the first single for them. And they put that out, of course. That went like hotcakes. So we did Unexpected Guest with them, the next single. And then before we went to America, we supporting the Dead Kennedys over there. That was the reason we went. We recorded a few tracks with John Loder in Sumner Studios, the studio recording in. We went to America, like I say, America for me was a real game changer for lyrics and things because, well, everything about America. I was desperate to come home. We were there like 4 or 5 weeks, but again, soaked it all up. And like I say, trying to be that educated, uneducated sort of teenager. I was reading so much. We'd mixing with Vietnam vets, ex-CIA people in interviews and stuff. Obviously, Jello Biafra is quite a character to be around for a while. We played with Johnny Thunders, Black Flag, DOA.
Did you meet a guy who was their roadie called Patrick O'Neill at that stage?
Dead Kennedys.
Yeah, Patrick. He did a book last year that I interviewed him for, and it was he was part of the Dead Kennedys, and he roadied for Sounds. That's it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And,
well, we met then. Do you remember him, Spon?
No, I don't. Well, no, I don't know. Not off the top of my head. Peter O'Neill, did you say his name?
Patrick O'Neill.
Patrick O'Neill.
Yes.
The name strikes a bell, but
it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
I can't. It's a long time ago. I really can't. I'll think about it and get back to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, we met a lot of people on that tour.
We
met,
did.
What's her name? Cynthia Plastercaster.
Oh, nice. There you go. God, that must
designs on my part. So I was scared stiff. I ran out the event. That was at the Malibu Gardens in San Francisco. We met a lot of people on that tour, but came back with lots of ideas. We came back and finished The Man and Only, the album, which Fresh released. Unfortunately, they sold about 30 or 35,000 the first week. Was it Spon? I remember a lot of records went out, and then they repressed it, and then it went bankrupt. Yeah. So we lost probably, we lost probably 50, 60 grand that they owed us. And that was the biggest setback we ever had. But the good thing was John Loder, who was starting to produce us and ran Southern Studios, and he also produced Crass and Poison Girls and acts like that. And he went on to produce a lot of the Discord bands. Yeah, he was with us. So he was bright, John, and he was in his probably late 30s. He was a real grown-up. He managed to use that bankruptcy to get our rights back for Man and Only. So we got the rights back to all of our records from Fresh, but we had no money. And he lent us the money to press them and put them out. And so we should have died at that point. This is very similar to the Luton football story, but don't start me on that. She'll be here all night. We got to the point where we were absolutely dead, but we actually reborn at that moment because we re-owned all of it, and we always owned all of our. We still own all of our rights between us. And that was that allowed us to do whatever we wanted to do with it, which was great. But it left us in poverty, so we had to go back on the road again for another couple of years. But I don't look on it as I say, we weren't in it for the business. We just wanted our bag of chips and get to the next show. So
absolutely, at that age. So one track on that album, Dorian. Can you remember how that song comes together? Because it's quite an amazing track.
Yeah, well, that's probably a Barclay James Harvest kicking in. No, I didn't say that. So I was reading books like The Going Out of Fashion, and Hermann Hesse was, I was reading his books, Oscar Wilde, Nietzsche. I've never really liked, but I was sucking all this stuff up. Thomas Mann, apart from Magic Mountain, which I think is one of the most overrated books of all time. And obviously, I read a picture of Dorian Gray. And what amazed me, there was this cartoon world we were living in where you'd see Thatcher giving this heart-rending speech. We must take this country and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, this is absolute rubbish. Saw straight through it. This is a Dorian Gray moment. She's coming out with all this stuff as if with all this sincerity, but actually, it's absolute bullshit. This is a whole separate face to the face that's really, enacting all these views and theories about how to, what we should be doing with our lives, So, we were just in there. Spon had written that lovely piano thing.
Yes.
Eddie did the bass thing. Was it Eddie or was it? I can't remember. Cretan Chaos. I can't remember Eddie or the American 15-year-old.
Yeah, it was Cretan, but Eddie
came
along and sorted bass out. Cretan laid down the initial part, he was only over here for about a month, 6 weeks or so. I had to go back because work permits and things.
He was only 15, wasn't he? I don't think he had a
Yeah,
work permit, but I shouldn't say that. Anyway, so as would happen, Spon had written that backing track, and I had this sort of current thoughts on Thatcher, and that song it was in 2 takes, just sang it, scraps and notes of paper, modern day Dorian Gray, it was as simple as that, really. But it was very much about Thatcher. Sit pretty in your place, abandon all loyalties for misery, insincerity, and disgrace.
Oh dear.
Teenage lyrics.
Excellent.
But, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I was thinking about this recently. I was just on holiday in Mallorca, and the guy we went to visit died while we were there. 67 or something, and I was just thinking about all the things that have happened in the past, and all this. Obviously, it's corny how fleeting life is and everything, but it's quite strange that you can look back at moments like we're talking about now, and the person then and the person we are now, there's hardly anything that unites us. We're leading different lives, different loves, different dreams. It's almost like the most cells in our bodies are sort of striding down a different place. We're different cells to the people we were then, and that era to me was quite strange because we were so young that nothing was premeditated. It just came out. Whereas now, if we try and do something, we overthink it. So a lot of the, and I think this is why people like the Paul McCartneys or Stevie Wonders can't write great songs when they get past a certain period in their life, because they've lost that spontaneity. You're not getting exposed to the life that probably inspired you. Living for the City wouldn't be written now because he doesn't know what the hell goes on in the city. Stevie Wonder's no stories coming his way. Paul McCartney has forgotten about how simple love is because it's so long ago that you had that sort of all-encompassing love moment, where you can think of anything else if you're lucky to ever find it. So it's quite weird talking about that era because I do feel like we're talking about different people.
Yes, but then it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because some of those lyrics that people wrote, and I was a massive Smiths fan, they were such memorable lyrics, but now I listen to the lyrics being written by the same person and they're just like quite clunky, and there's not that. Yeah. And I often wonder what it is that makes that lyric now just like, that's just a bit clunky, and I forget, whereas that lyric back in the sort of 80s, possibly early 90s, you can still remember them.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And a beauty to them.
But there's some, I don't know, I often think it's like the planets line up, and if you're lucky, it might just happen and then it's gone, unless you're David Bowie, where you suddenly can find another bit of inspiration and the planets line up again. But it's a different one. But with your band, you'd obviously started changing lineups a bit. You'd lost a few members, you'd gained a few members at this stage, hadn't you?
Well, we never fired anybody. The apples fell off the tree. Our first bass player, Segovia, we were going to America and his girlfriend wouldn't let him come. And we were sitting there the day before we're leaving for America, and he said, Jane won't let me go. And we're like, you've got to be joking. So we rang up the Dead Kennedys manager and said, there's only 3 of us coming, we need to find a bass player. And she said, I know the perfect guy. And then when we rocked up, he was 14 or 15 years old, Cretan Chaos, Jason. And he was a brilliant bass player because in America, they had Fenders, they had Gibsons, whereas we were playing copies. They had money in America, these kids. And then, he came back to Britain with us, did a short tour. We had a huge riot with the British movement at one of our concerts in Bedford, where 80 to 100 skinheads just broke up the whole, us, the police, the whole concert got wiped out. It was an organised bust on us. Bedford was the centre of the British movement, so we were asking for it to play there, you might say. But we didn't expect it to be that bad. It was awful. So he left. That freaked him out because, you don't get that happen in America. You probably had the riots in Washington. That's the closest they've got, the Proud Boys or something, So he went back, and then we took on someone called Lol, who was another girl who was she played for another band in Luton. So she toured with us for a while, but she never wanted to be permanent. I mean, she was locked in a van with 4 other guys with, stinky feet, dirty clothes, snoring, it wasn't an idyllic existence for her, but I liked her a lot, actually.
No,
she was a sweet thing. She passed away, actually, a couple of years
we
ago.
lived in a van.
We lived in a van and a transit. And then I was peeing, Eddie won't like this story, but I was taking a pee in Northampton, one of our gigs, and Eddie was the other end of the urinal. And he said, not why we were peeing. When we turned around, I said, I'm a bass player. You still looking for a bass player? I said, yeah, come and try out. So Eddie came down about 2 weeks later to Luton, and he was just incredible. It's what we'd always been looking for, really, especially for me, because he had a real funk to his bass playing, real presence, like in your face.
Yes.
So we took Eddie on, and it was as simple as that. So we went through bass players, but apart from that, well, Spon joined early on, of course. 3 became 4, and then we stayed at 4, and they always left my guitar behind or the amp behind. So whenever I got somewhere, oh great, where's the amp? Yeah, been left behind. Of course it was, because they knew I was a crap guitarist. One allowed me to play one finger keyboards for a minute, but that was pretentious twaddle. So we pretty well stayed a 4-piece, and I've always liked trios. I've loved trios, so I like the idea of keeping the band compact, because there's less communication needs to go on to really make it work.
Yes, there you go. Hendrix, Cream, all those classics.
Groundhogs. I love the Groundhogs. Do you know the Groundhogs?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah,
the Groundhogs.
Tony McPhee passed away recently, unfortunately.
Yes.
Brilliant, Tony McPhee.
So when was the next time you went in the studio? What was the next kind of recording session?
The next recording session after Ram and Only, we did a B-side for Twist in the Tail. What was the B-side for, Spon? Is it Sexual?
Sexual, which was on the album, but Twist in the Tail, which wasn't.
Yeah. And that was a political sort of rant at the time, wasn't it? But Sexual is an interesting track. I said to someone the other week, said to me, somebody's making a short film on UK Decay, decided to make the short film. So I met him the other day. He said to me, Sexual, it's about the whole trans debate, isn't it? I said, well, it's not about the debate, but the lyrics were very much, I'd read somewhere about this experimentation where they were replacing the sexual organs of a man with a woman's sexual organs. It was like a transplant, like a glue-on, and vice versa. It literally said some people are born neither sex. Some people are born sort of believing they should be the other sex. And I read it. It's actually. I was just learning German at the time. I read it in a German. I think it's Tip or City, one of the Berlin magazines, and it was very much. I just thought how shocking that would be to the world. So Sexual was. I'm trying to remember the lyrics. And they were saying about how your sexuality gives you a purpose in life. It wasn't that phrase because it was in clunky German, but and the lines were something like, in confusion, a purpose in life, the choice, a problem, a husband for a wife. Hormones in demand. I can't remember those. Something about hormones in demand, because these are hormonal, because you could get the transplant, but you need the hormone change as well to make sure that they were fed what they need to be fed. And if I can remember the lyrics, it was very much about that, about that, we're going to a world where you could actually choose what sexuality you want to be. And at the end, it was like there was a Mary Whitehouse character at the time that was against any sex on TV or any discussion of sex. And I mentioned her in the song somewhere about having her knickers in the air or something, because, oh my God, how this would shock people. It would have shocked my parents, who were very easygoing. It would shock, the establishment if suddenly people could say, I want to be a boy, and you transition. I didn't know the word transition at the time. I remember trying to think of what the word would be where you change one sex to the other. Anyway, have a look at the lyrics of that song.
I will, yes.
It was definitely about this whole the trans world we're in now, and it's that in itself I find hard, because people ask me, what are your thoughts on that, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't have concrete thoughts on it, especially about the age of being able to transition and stuff. I'm very aware that as gay people were in the 80s, when we were fighting against homophobia, trans people need protecting at the moment because they're very vulnerable. And in that sense, I think we need to protect, and needs to be less aggressiveness around the debate. But I don't, and I think now I've learned, you get to an age where, you get to a point of wisdom where you don't have to have an answer for everything. You just got to listen more.
This is true. Yeah. Yes, I'm with you on that one. It's like, sort of combination of I don't know the debate and I'm not sure if I'm that interested. I'm not talking about that particular
that's
debate,
right.
but there's other debates that I just think
yeah. Well, even what you just said now, if that was on TV, you're cancelled. It's so hard you got to be. It means that either people aren't going to talk because of the consequence,
yes,
or they're going to take a side very quickly without really thinking it through. And I said because I work with a couple of charities, and one of them I said the other day they're taking the piss out of my age, and I said to the young people, stop thinking about yourself, start properly thinking about the world around you, other things around you, not you, but everything else. Oh, I got booed. This was a friendly debate. It wasn't any soapbox and hype up on me, but it was like, it was interesting because we've got to a place, like Spon said, that seems very toxic. How the hell did we get here when, literally at the end of the 70s, we really thought, things were going to change. Started by the punk movement, taken on by people that came out of it. As you saw, so many TV producers, film directors, obviously musicians had come from around that punk movement with messages, for the world. But then they started to write about message in the bottle, So again, it went into commercialism and the bottle never arrived,
Yes, this is true. So then what's your next period of the band? Because you bring out a cassette, a live recording, don't you? They called something like, is it Celebration?
Spon?
Well, before we did that, the last thing we did was Task Force was floating off towards Argentina. We were in the studio recording Rising from the Dread, the 4-track EP, which really was our last great proper per se recording. It was 4 tracks. What Abbo mentioned before, there was a track called Werewolf on it. It was about 8 to 10 minutes long. I can't remember exactly how long it was, but
10. Well, I had the stuff on the beginning. I think it was 10 or 11, wasn't it?
With all the growling and stuff at the beginning. That was controversial, wasn't it? Because Penny Rimbold, that is from Crass, he was kind of funding it, wasn't he? That was going to be Corpus Christi Records, and it was going to be the first records on his new label. And the grounding for the new label was that Crass were an anarcho punk rock band, and they had the Crass records, obviously. But this was a new label which was going to spotlight the new generation of protest, if you like, and they saw us as being at the spearhead of that. So we were given the task of delivering the first single for them. So the catalogue number for the record that actually came out in the end was Christ, It's Number 1. So we did 4 tracks for that, which was Werewolf, Testament, Rising from the Dread, and Jerusalem Over the White Cliffs of Dover. And as we were recording them, Tony in the corner of the studio was showing the flag waving and the ships all leaving for Argentina, and for the war ahead. And it was a real sort of pivotal moment. I don't, it did kind of mould the background to our recording there, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was live on telly, and we sort of took it in, and I think definitely the record Jerusalem and Testament. There were sort of aggressive sounding moments of the record, more from Spon and Eddie and Steve than me. That was.
Was it also around that time? Was it 782 when we had that embassy siege where the SAS, and it was very spectacular?
The Iranian.
Yes, was that around 82, 83? Because that was kind of another patriotic moment where we killed the bad guys.
Yeah.
It felt like it was, yeah.
It was on jingoism, wasn't it? It was really high flag waving jingoism.
Yes. Yeah. It was tricky. It was tricky.
It was so far away from our beliefs, that was the problem. It was so far away. We didn't really need a cheering section to validate our moral compass at the time. We did what we thought was right. But there was a huge cheering section for the opposition, it seemed. I remember going to the National Front March in South London, and the police being so hostile to the protesters, and the National Front were just walking through, like guarded by the police. They were hammering hell out of everybody around. It's like, oh my God, it seemed a little bit like it is at the moment. But at least we, I hate to use the word weaponized, but we had this platform that we thought would perhaps try and change the world, i.e. music, punk. So we did have hope. We never lost hope in things. But it's I don't know. I thought when I got in the late 20s and 30s how naive it all was, what we were doing. But now I look at it and I don't think it was. I think it was just very honest and authentic. And I think one of the things we weren't aware of, we saw, like the oppositions, the right wings and the Thatchers, we saw them as being these, confident models of knowing exactly where they were going. They had the flag behind them, they had history behind them, Churchill quotes, all this stuff. And of course, you eventually realize that it's a sign of great inner insecurity when you're hostile to the unfamiliar. And that's what they were. They're very insecure. They're worried their world was being taken away by these Pakistanis and Indians and, Jamaicans and, working class types and miners and all these things. And actually we were a threat to them, albeit we weren't probably pop enough. I don't mean us as a band. I mean the collective, the aggregate of all of us that felt that they were wrong.
Yes, this is true. I know. I was just thinking of those kind of moments like, Viv Anderson playing for England or, the three plays for West Brom. This was kind of like, can they, pick John Barnes? I mean, the hatred that everyone got for just appearing was amazing.
Oh, Liverpool. Luton played Liverpool and up there. And Ricky Hill and Brian Steen, the bananas were thrown on the pitch by Liverpool fans. It was shocking. I think at this point, you probably need to come out with what football team you support, David. Because you seem to be a little bit savvy on football, and again, this is the interviewing the interviewer. Come on.
Well, it's a little bit embarrassing, but my first love, because it was one of those things. I was growing up in the Ipswich areas. Everyone liked Ipswich, but everyone talked about Man United and George Best. Yeah. So I loved, George Best, but unfortunately, I was too young to realise that Man United were dreadful and they got relegated. But because that was my first team, I supported them for that period until about the mid-80s. Then I hated football for a while. Then, Eric Cantona and Ferguson appear, and I've become kind of fascinated, but I've kind of now become a bit more bored of it. But there was a kind of the 70s and early 80s was just, a glorious time for football,
Yeah, it was. No, I can take a Man United. I can take anything.
But it was that kind of, I don't know, when you were growing up, just hearing about George Best and this kind of excitement.
Oh, he's genius. I love George Best. As a footballer, I thought he was absolutely brilliant. And of course, his quotes about wasting money and that, it's sort of so nihilistic. They're brilliant. I suppose what I'm trying to say is back to what I'm thinking. I think it's always difficult to escape from youth. We all think we've still got it going on and we're connected to it. But if I'm honest, I think youth is so far away from where I am now. Even being fit and healthy, still playing football or tennis or cricket, whatever, anything with a ball. But those days, we're very disconnected from now. And that's why it's quite interesting. People like Kathy, Mick Mercer, who are there are writing books now. And some of the journalists in the broadsheets as well came from that era. Because this is their language, they can crystallize feelings or articulate, what it might have been like for those that weren't there, or even for us that were there and weren't thinking more than what was in front of our nose,
Yes. But it's it's interesting because it's only been very recently in the last 5 years that 80s slightly alternative scene has been documented. You had that King Rocker, didn't you, Stuart Lee, doing the film on the Nightingales. There was a film about a band called Rima Rima that only made one EP. So there's a film called on Rima Rima now that's just come out. Really? Yes.
Wow.
I'll send you. Pardon?
Marco, wasn't it?
And Gary from who went into Renegade Soundwave, and
really.
And the other members, that was the first band on 4AD Records, and the other members all went into various other bands on 4AD. But and Dorothy Max Pryor, who was the drummer, who was also just did a book herself. So that whole world is being documented quite left, right, and centre, as with Kathy, and then John Robb's book on goth, which and
which the one we're not in. Everyone, I met John Robb. I met him at the Six Music Fest in Manchester, and he said, "Oh, I've done a book on goth." I'm like, and you're not in it, or something. I'm like, I just said, I don't care, what. And anyway, he wanted to talk about it more, so because I've always sort of got on with him. And he said, "Oh yeah, you didn't invent goth. It was, Lou Reed or something, blah blah blah." And he went on about something. I said, "I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. George Ford invented the motor car. I drive my car every day, and I don't think about George Ford. I just get in the car and drive it." It's it was quite a funny moment, and I didn't know about the book. But then suddenly, from all directions, people are saying, "Oh my goodness, he's reinvented history or something, or he must have something against you." But hey, journalists have always had stuff against us,
Yes. Well, anyway, Kathy's on your side, so there you go.
Yeah. Well, I like Kathy. I like John as well. I don't have to be in his book to like him or not like him.
So what happens with the band in 83, 84 then? Is this your kind of Ziggy Stardust moment?
Yeah, I think so. We was probably more popular than we'd ever been, obviously. We were doing serious numbers across Europe. A lot of interest. The album come out in Japan. A lot of interest to go and tour forever. And I think, because, like I say, we're very much four individuals. And we didn't really, we just said, what, we're in Germany one day and we said, there's a lot of bands coming through in a similar lane to us, not musically necessarily, but a similar vein. And they've been playing with us, all over. We did one gig at the Zigzag Club with Southern Death Cult, Dance Society, Sex Gang Children, Play Dead. Perhaps it was 2 gigs. We did 2. I can't remember. Spon can remember these things. All these bands are coming through. And we sort of said, what? We shouldn't have done it now. Think about it. We should have just made another bloody record and carried on. But we just sort of, we were young and definitely not foolish. We weren't fools, but we'd never been in it to have a career. We was in it because we liked making music and we had things to say. So we just sort of said, okay, that's it. And I think Spon was the one, probably most sensible. We questioned that, said we should probably carry on. But we didn't. And that was it. So in 83, we did 2 gigs at Club Foot around Christmas time in Clarendon, of which that Night Celebration cassette is one of them. And they were very special shows, I think, for us, because we did them without really thinking about what was happening tomorrow. We just did them, and that was it. And it was gone.
Yeah. Yes, pretty fair approximation. The 2 shows were absolutely packed. Well, the queues went round the block and had to turn quite a lot of people away, apparently. And the first show, John Loder hired in a huge multi-track caravan and went absolutely apeshit trying to record it, mic and everything up separately. And then the second show we did, he stuck up a Sony Walkman with 2 microphones, and that captured the essence of that show. It's one of the best live tapes that we've done, actually.
Yes.
So we released that as,
I didn't know he'd recorded it on multi-track. That's new to me, but yeah. That must exist somewhere then, does it?
Well, I would have thought it does somewhere, yeah. But we had to listen to it and we not sure about it. The performance on the second night was much better anyway. It's so emotional. Everybody was in tears in the audience.
They were, yeah, bloody hell.
Grizz, the sound engineer, was in tears. There was like an explosion of emotions.
Yeah.
And it all comes out.
It did all come out, yeah, but we didn't really think about it. Because all I can remember was there was a big chandelier hanging down in the ballroom, and I thought, I wonder if I can actually get that if I jump high enough. So I ran across the stage in the middle of a song, and I got up there, and I was on this chandelier with no idea how to get down. I was going back and forth, and apparently, because I could notice, it was getting longer and longer and longer and nearer to the audience, and I still don't know how I got down, but somehow I ended up back on stage. I think something to do with some of the audience managed to sort of get me out of this awkward situation and back on stage. But anyway, so that was the end of it. But there is a cassette of it. And of course, cassettes never really tell the story. No. I've got a video of it somewhere, a VHS of it that John Loder sent me many years ago, which I've never watched, but that's somewhere.
Yes.
I don't know which one, first or second one, but And that was it, really. And then, we went off and did a few things, and then we went off and did musical things after that and non-musical things. And then quite a few years later, we got together and made New Hope for the Dead, an album, which, it's sort of, I can't remember how it came together. I think it was because we got asked to do some shows in Luton. We did a show in Luton, that's right. Well, I was at a show because Spon had kept the community together, and he was doing once or twice a year, whatever it was. He was doing these DK community things where a lot of the old followers, fans would get together and just have a night out, Anyway, he invited me to one of these things. I went to it. Next thing I know, it's like, get up on stage, you're singing, we're going to do a couple of numbers. Like, oh my God, I haven't sung since then. I've been songwriting still, obviously mainly in America, in the sort of black music world. So I got up on stage and they played a couple of songs and I couldn't remember the lyrics. It was so embarrassing. It's that nightmare where, I don't know if you've ever had it, where you're something you can do really well or you can do, and then when it comes to it, nothing comes out your mouth. Or you're being chased and your legs don't move.
Yes.
So I stand on stage and they're playing these songs and I couldn't remember the lyrics because I really hadn't thought about it all those years, And actually, I went home and told the story I had, 2 children, probably, 6 and 8 they were at the time. And I told the story and they said, Dad, were you in a band? And not actually older than that. They were 8 and 12 or something. Were you in a band? I said, yeah, I was years ago. They'd never heard of it. I'd never mentioned it. I'd never even thought about it. And then from that, we got asked to do a few more shows. And then we did a few more shows and a lot of people turned up. A lot of young people turned up. The first one, I think, was in Milan, wasn't it, Spon?
Yeah, oh my goodness, we were that Italians. Yeah. It seemed like all these young people, they could have only been like 21, 22 years old. And they're all singing along to all our lyrics. It's like, wow.
and ID Magazine was there, like interviewing all these young kids about, the fashions of goth and stuff. And we were like, I think I was wearing a football shirt, it's like, because it was hot and comfortable. And it was funny because we were suddenly back on the road again, and we went back and we toured Italy and we did a show in Paris where, again, all the police have smashed up our last show in Paris with about 2,000 people, audience present. And the riot police came walking through the show before we went on stage. And, 30 years difference, but it felt like, getting back on the horse. We hadn't really been away too long. It was quite weird. Time sort of dissipated.
Yeah.
And we made another record, New Hope for the Dead, which I think, there's a couple of tracks on there that were written in haste in the studio, but the rest of it was, I think it's probably as good as the first record in many ways. Still got a bit of life in it. And I think, there's still another probably 20 songs kicking around that we haven't recorded or released or whatever, but perhaps one day.
Is it the case that the band is sort of semi-hibernating, but potentially there for the odd live date or session, getting back in the studio?
Spon? I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
We've learned to say never say never. So, the last things we did, we played in Luton and 2 big gigs in Europe in 2019. There's obvious difficulties these days with playing in Europe on our kind of level because we're not the Rolling Stones. We can't hire an army of people to sort out all the paperwork. And there's also an issue for the would-be promoters out there who all of a sudden have to fork out double the amount to get us across.
Yes. Tricky.
I think we could do it, though. I think those things can be overcome. Obviously, that's the business I'm in. So if we can't do it, it's a poor show. I think it's just a fact. Yeah, Eddie's living in Birmingham. Spon's living in Wales. I'm living in Ladbroke Grove. Ray's living in Oxfordshire. So we're not down the pub together and like, let's get together. Every rehearsal, it takes planning,
Yes.
So, it could happen. I think we'd only do it if we had something to say. And regardless of any ears to listen, using the Clash lyric, I think, we'd still do it. We're not audience hunting. So, never say never.
But you see a lot of
days
bands like
pass-
Wasted Youth is sort of out there doing their shows now, aren't they? And
yeah,
I know it's a
Rocco
slightly
sent me a
different.
text. Rocco sent me a text a few months ago and said, "Hey, Abbo, do you want to come to our show?" And I looked at it, it's Rocco, and I'm like, "Rocco, hold on," because he was doing a second-hand glasses stall on Portobello Road, and I met him. He hasn't changed really, about 10 years ago, and he's still got my number. We exchanged numbers. Let's meet up. And I met with Billy Duffy when the Cult played a secret gig in London. My mate was Vince Power was promoting it, so I went down there. I went backstage, and the bouncer was like, "No way, no one's coming in." Blah blah blah. Oh, just tell him Abbo's here. And then suddenly I heard, "Abbo, come on through." And I went through with my mate Jim, and there was Billy and Gavin from a group called Under Two Flags back in the day. And for about an hour, we just spun a yarn. We had such a good laugh because when actually I finished with UK Decay, I got together with Billy in Brixton, and we started to write songs for a new group. And Billy was good friends with Johnny Marr. So he said, "Oh, my mate's band's playing in London, doing their first London show in a couple of weeks' time. And he said, do you want to support?" So we supported the Smiths at the Electric Cinema in Brixton. And there was Craig, who was a well-known tour manager, who unfortunately died in a car crash a couple of years ago. Myself, Billy, I think Gavin from Under Two Flags. Was it Nigel Preston on drums? And we did a 20-minute jam called Rubber Love. And we just jammed for 20 minutes, and we were the Smiths' first support band in London. and it's, we met them afterwards, and we hung out with them. It's very funny because I remember getting on really well with Morrissey. We just had a real laugh. I can't remember what it was about. We were doing Irish jokes, I think it was, but jokes about the English and Irish accent, reversing it. And Billy was chatting with Johnny Marr, and then now my sort of 27-year-old son, his favourite band is the Smiths. And he spends his life trying to convert me to become, the biggest Smiths fan in the world. And I've never really connected with it until recently when I was reading someone's profile in one of the papers. I think it's a Guardian Observer. Well, I would say that. It's not the Telegraph, but it could have been. I don't know. It was in one of those papers. And they said, my favourite line of poetry is, if I could die by your side, being hit by the bus and stuff.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I said, that's a beautiful lyric. And I saw it by Smiths. I'm like, oh my God. So now I've literally just started listening to the Smiths a couple of weeks ago, having been so close to them so long ago, because they're Billy's mates. It was my mate's band. So I didn't take them seriously, and I think his lyrics, and Smith's lyrics, are beautiful. And I've got over the sound of the voice. So you never know. It's Smiths is sitting next to, Susan the Banshees and just about, 1,500 records away from Once Again, Bartley James Harvest.
Yes.
So I've got a couple of records.
Well, absolutely. Did you ever like Wishbone Ash? Did you ever go through that?
Yeah. My sister liked them. I saw them on the Argus tour, which was their best record, I think, a Wishbone 4.
Yes.
Again, I took all these things in because been told to talk quietly. I took these things in because it was around me. So I listened to it. And they played in St Albans, Dunstable, Friars Aylesbury used to be a venue we went to a lot, wasn't it, Spon?
Yeah.
So they had everybody from Green Slade to, I saw Iggy there with Bowie on keyboards. I saw Bowie there on just before Hunky Dory came out. I've got a lovely recording of that if you want it. Live in Aylesbury, or just on my cassette recorder. So I don't think turn down anything really. The only thing we didn't really like was, I suppose, the Bay City Rollers, David Cassidy, Donny Osmond. Even bands like the Rubettes and stuff. It's the pop music of your childhood. So I've never been a big Beatles fan, I must admit. I'm more of a Stones fan, but now I realise I shouldn't really choose. But the Beatles I'm still not a huge fan. I like George Harrison's songs. I prefer McCartney's songs to Lennon. Anyway, that's about me. That's enough of that one. Wishbone Ash, yes, yeah. The King will come.
Yes, the King will come. It's a classic, isn't it? Anyway, look, this has been. But I was just going to say, you apart from you've always had a life in music, though, haven't you? You've had these huge chapters, starting record labels, managing tours. I mean, music has just totally consumed you for 40 odd years. So, is it the case you're still very much involved in that business world of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think the business through the music. I do the business, obviously, but it's the music that I love. In fact, very proudly now managing a soul singer from Luton called Charisse, who, from she grew up about half a mile from where I grew up. And we have a lot in common. She's come through her mum's Jamaican, a local Labour politician. So her views probably align with mine anyway. But it's interesting, so I'm watching her sort of grow, and wishing that we'd have had someone that could have stood beside us and navigate us around some of the obstacles of the business side of the world. But yeah, it's a classic case of I remember my dad, God bless him. He wasn't particularly musical, and I remember him saying to me, because he, obviously he was going out to work and I was getting my, £2 a week pocket money, and I'd save up and just buy LPs or singles. And I remember him saying to me, sitting around listening to this music all day, it's never going to do you any good. Why didn't you go and learn a trade, And it was lovely when I actually first band I managed a group called EMF, and we had a huge hit, Unbelievable. And I sent him and my mum around America on a Wallace Arnold tour, one of those old biddy sort of coach tours,
Yeah.
And he kept saying to me, how do you afford this? Where's the money come from? And then, I used to manage Westminster Abbey Choir, produce their records. And him and my mum came to the Abbey, and he was there, and there was speeches at the end, taking everybody in. I got thanked by the Dean of Westminster. And my dad he just thought it was imposter syndrome. He thought something was wrong here. And of course, it all goes back to listening to, Hawkwind, Black Sabbath, Bob Marley, Stevie Wonder is probably my favourite artists of all time, him and Bob. And Dead Moon. I'm a big fan of Dead Moon. Do you know Dead Moon?
No.
Great band. Yeah. Yeah, I think he may have just died. Oh, God, that's the saying of the night, isn't it? But the music lives on. Dead Moon, what a band. And they're a band I discovered probably 10 or 12 years ago. I've got everything by them, like 10 or 12 albums on vinyl, obviously got the CD versions. Dead Moon, brilliant band. And I'm still discovering things that, I have a life which is my day job, which is actually 24/7, 7 days a week, because a lot of the artists, the music is 10%, the other 90% is getting them their personalities through life, because obviously they're perhaps a bit more sensitive than most of us, with a lot of challenges and AI hanging over us at the moment. But it's still buying records and books is my favourite pastime. Yes. My wife likes climbing mountains. She wants to go. We went to Everest a few years ago and did the base camp thing. She wants to climb mountains, and I want to tour the libraries and bars of Bohemia. But we still get on, and we're still together. And she has built those lovely shelves behind me for my records.
Well, that's very good. Well, it was like, I think John Waters once said about John Peel, if he ever reaches puberty, we're in trouble, which is it's a nice thing, isn't it? I think, to keep that hunger. But I know David Bowie and Lemmy, who were born in the same year, both said, it was the music when you were 16 that stays with you, which was Little Richard, Eddie Cochran, Buddy Holly. Yeah. You can't replace that 16-year-old brain, but that's the music that is going to always be with you.
Syndrome, isn't it?
Yeah.
Called Ugly Duckling.
Yes, dear old Lemmy. We loved him.
I still think there's really, really good music out there at the moment. I still find a lot. I was talking on email with Nigel House from Rough Trade shop today. He knows whenever I see him, any of his shops in the world, he's probably going to be $100 better off by the time I leave, Anyway.
Right. Look, thank you ever so much for this. This has been amazing. So I recommend that. So you can read a little bit in it. So she's got quite a nice chapter for you. There you go.
Okay. That's funny. All right.
And anyway, look, thank you. And I'll send you the link if you want. And you can always put it on your social media platform sites. That'll be amazing. Okay.
Sure. You got it.
It's been great. Thank you ever so much. I'll say good night. And
nice to see you, Spon.
See you.
Yes. Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
There you go. I know. I love leaving those last bits in because, frankly, Mr. Shankly, they're quite exciting. They make me smile. And it does, on this occasion, it does sound like the Waltons, really. Anyway, a massive thank you to two of the members of UK Decay, that's Abbo and Spon. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Yes, indeed. Also, these interviews have all been archived. Aren't you lucky? So you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.